Other bullies had no idea. They just attacked a champion fighter. Now they pay. Marcus Rivera adjusted his worn backpack straps as he navigated through the crowded hallways of Westfield High School. At 17, he stood barely 5'6", with a slight build that made him appear younger than his classmates. His olive skin bore the subtle scars of childhood accidents, and his dark eyes held a quiet intensity that most people mistook for shyness. 3 weeks into the semester, he still felt like an outsider in this sprawling suburban school. The move from Phoenix had been necessary after his father's job transfer, but Marcus missed everything about his old life. Here at Westfield, nobody knew about the countless hours he'd spent in underground fighting circuits, the brutal training sessions with his uncle Ramon, or the regional championship belt gathering dust in his bedroom closet. His parents had made him promise to leave that life behind, to focus on academics, and avoid the violence that had nearly gotten him expelled from his previous school. Just keep your head down, he reminded himself, the same mantra he'd repeated every morning for 3 weeks. Graduate and get out. The warning bell echoed through the corridors as students rushed to their next classes. Marcus quickened his pace toward his chemistry classroom when a shoulder slammed into him from behind, sending his books scattering across the polished floor. Laughter erupted around him as he dropped to his knees, frantically gathering his scattered papers. "Watch where you're going, transfer boy," sneered Jake Morrison, the school's star linebacker. At 6'2", with bleached blonde hair and the cocky swagger that came with athletic popularity, Jake commanded attention wherever he went. His cronies, Brett and Tyler, flanked him like loyal guard dogs, their varsity jackets announcing their social status to anyone within viewing distance. Marcus kept his eyes down, collecting his chemistry notes without responding. He'd learned that engaging only made things worse. The crowd of onlookers dispersed as quickly as they'd gathered, leaving him alone on the cold floor with his dignity in tatters. "Pathetic," Tyler muttered as they walked away, their laughter echoing down the hallway. The pattern established itself quickly over the following days. Marcus would attempt to navigate through his classes peacefully, only to find himself targeted in increasingly creative ways. In the cafeteria, Jake would accidentally bump into him while carrying a full tray, sending food cascading down Marcus's clothes. During gym class, Brett would slam volleyballs directly at his head during warm-ups. Tyler specialized in the subtle humiliations, loosening his locker combination, hiding his textbooks, spreading rumors about his supposed cowardice. "Why don't you fight back?" asked Sarah Chen, one of the few students who'd shown him any kindness. They sat together during lunch, occupying a corner table far from Jake's territorial domain near the windows. Marcus pushed his sandwich around his plate, appetite long gone. "Fighting doesn't solve anything," he replied, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. If only she knew how easily he could end this. How many grown men had learned to fear the lightning-quick combinations his uncle had drilled into him since childhood. How the underground circuit had nicknamed him Silent Storm for his devastating ability to end fights before they truly began. But his parents' disappointed faces haunted him. The principal's warning from Phoenix echoed in his memory. "One more incident and you're expelled permanently." His future depended on staying invisible, on enduring whatever these privileged bullies threw at him. The torment escalated during the 4th week when Jake discovered Marcus's afternoon routine. Every day after school, Marcus would retreat to the empty gymnasium to run laps alone, finding solace in the rhythmic pounding of his feet against the polished floor. It was the closest thing to training he allowed himself, a small rebellion against his enforced pacifism. Jake and his crew cornered him there on a Tuesday afternoon, their footsteps echoing ominously in the vast space. "Look what we have here," Jake announced, his voice bouncing off the walls. Little Marcus all alone in his safe space. Marcus stopped running, his breathing controlled despite the adrenaline beginning to course through his veins. 3 against 1 in an empty gymnasium. No teachers around, no witnesses except the dust motes dancing in the afternoon sunlight, streaming through the high windows. "We've been watching you, transfer boy," Brett added, cracking his knuckles dramatically. "Always. Running away, always hiding. Makes us wonder what you're so afraid of." "I'm afraid of what I'll do to you," Marcus thought, his hands unconsciously forming loose fists at his sides. "I'm afraid of the monster my uncle taught me to become." Instead, he attempted to walk around them toward the exit. Jake stepped directly into his path, chest puffed out with manufactured intimidation. "Where are you going? We're just getting started." The first shove sent Marcus stumbling backward. The second knocked him off his feet entirely. As he hit the gymnasium floor, muscle memory kicked in. He rolled smoothly and came up in a defensive crouch before catching himself and forcing his body to relax. Tyler noticed the fluid movement. Did you see that? Kid moved like he knows. Something, Jake laughed dismissively. Knows something about falling down, maybe? They left him there on the floor, their laughter echoing long after their footsteps faded. Marcus remained motionless for several minutes, fighting the urge to chase them down and show them exactly what he knew about fighting. His uncle's voice whispered in his memory. A true warrior chooses his battles carefully, mijo. Patience is the deadliest weapon. The breaking point came 3 days later during lunch period. Marcus sat with Sarah and 2 other quiet students at their usual corner table when Jake's voice boomed across the cafeteria. Hey everybody, look at the loser table over there. Transfer boy found himself some other freaks to hang out with. Satansoy. Entire cafeteria turned to stare. Hundreds of eyes focused on their small group as Jake strutted closer, his friends trailing behind like hyenas following a lion. I heard a rumor about you, transfer boy, Jake announced loud enough for everyone to hear. Someone said you got kicked out of your old school for starting fights. That true? Marcus felt his jaw clench involuntarily. The half-truth stung more than any physical blow could. I wasn't kicked out, he said quietly. What was that? Speak. Turb coward. I said I wasn't kicked out. Marcus's voice carried clearly now, drawing murmurs from the assembled crowd. Jake's eyes lit up with malicious delight. Oh, so you can talk. Here I thought maybe you were mute or something. Tell us then. Why did you really leave, Phoenix? What are you running from? Sarah placed a warning hand on Marcus's arm, but he barely felt it. The familiar fire was building in his chest, the same burning sensation that preceded every fight. In the underground circuit, his vision sharpened, picking out the subtle weaknesses in Jake's stance, the way Brett favored his left leg, Tyler's habit of dropping his guard when he laughed. Cat got your tongue again. Jake reached across the table and snatched Marcus's sandwich, taking an exaggerated bite before dropping it on the floor. Oops, clumsy me. The cafeteria had gone completely silent. Every student in the room watched the drama unfold like spectators at a gladiator match. Some pulled out phones already recording what they hoped would become viral content. Marcus stood slowly, his movements deliberate and controlled. For the first time in weeks, he looked Jake directly in the eyes. Pick it up, Jake blinked. Apparently, surprised by the quiet command. What did you just say to me? I said pick it up. Marcus's voice remained calm, but something had shifted in his posture. The slight boy who'd been enduring weeks of torment was gone, replaced by someone who radiated a dangerous stillness. Several students in the crowd noticed the change. Sarah's eyes widened as she recognized something predatory in her quiet friend's stance. Even Brett and Tyler seemed to sense that the dynamic had somehow shifted. Jake, however, was too intoxicated by the audience's attention to read the warning signs. Or what, transfer boy, you'll make me. He grabbed Marcus's milk carton and poured it slowly onto the dropped sandwich, the white liquid spreading across the cafeteria floor. There, now it matches the rest of the trash at this table. The insult to Sarah and his other friends lit a fuse that weeks of personal humiliation hadn't managed to ignite. Marcus felt the last of his restraint crumble like a dam giving way to floodwaters. Tomorrow, he said quietly, his voice cutting through the cafeteria's silence like a blade. 3:30, the parking lot behind the gymnasium. Just you and me. Jake's confident smirk faltered slightly. Something in Marcus's tone suggested this wasn't the empty threat of a desperate victim. What? You heard me. No friends, no audience, no teachers, just us. Marcus stepped closer, and Jake involuntarily took a half-step backward. Unless you're afraid to face me without your pack. The crowd erupted in excited whispers. Someone shouted, fight! And suddenly the entire cafeteria was buzzing with anticipation. Jake found himself trapped by his own reputation. Backing down now would destroy his carefully constructed image. Fine, he snarled, trying to regain his swagger. Tomorrow at Taue, 3:30. I'll be happy to teach you some respect, transfer boy. Marcus nodded once and walked away, leaving his scattered lunch behind. As he pushed through the cafeteria doors, he heard Jake's voice trying to rally the crowd's support, but the linebacker's usual confidence seemed forced now. That evening, Marcus stood in his bedroom staring at the championship belt in his closet. 27 professional fights, 27 victories, 18 by knockout, the youngest fighter ever to win the Southwest Regional Championship in the under-18 division. His uncle had called him a prodigy, a natural-born fighter with instincts that couldn't be taught. He lifted the belt, feeling its familiar weight in his hands. Tomorrow, he would break his promise to his parents. Tomorrow, he would reveal the secret he'd kept hidden for 3 weeks. But Jake had crossed a line when he'd humiliated Sarah and the others. Some things were worth fighting for. Word of the upcoming fight spread through Westfield High like wildfire. By the next morning, everyone knew about the challenge. Teachers whispered about it in the faculty lounge. Students debated the outcome in hushed conversations between classes. The consensus was overwhelmingly in Jake's favor. The star athlete versus the quiet transfer student seemed like a mismatch of epic proportions. Marcus moved through his classes in a bubble of focused calm. His chemistry teacher noticed he seemed different somehow, more present and alert. Sarah tried to talk him out of the confrontation during lunch, but he simply smiled and told her not to worry. Jake's huge, Marcus. He could really hurt you. I know exactly how big he is, Marcus replied. I've been watching him for weeks. At 3:15, nearly half the school had gathered in the parking lot behind the gymnasium. Students lined the perimeter like spectators at an ancient coliseum, their phones ready to capture whatever happened. Brett and Tyler stood near the building's back entrance, confident in their leader's inevitable victory. Jake arrived at exactly 3:30, wearing his varsity jacket and soaking up the crowd's attention. He'd spent the day accepting congratulations on his upcoming victory, his confidence bolstered by the universal assumption that he would dominate the smaller boy. Marcus appeared 5 minutes later, walking alone across the empty parking lot. He'd changed from his school clothes into a simple white t-shirt and dark jeans. No jacket, no protective gear, nothing to suggest he was prepared for a serious fight. The crowd fell silent as the two combatants faced each other in the center of the makeshift arena. Jake had 6 inches and at least 40 pounds on his opponent. Under the afternoon sun, the size difference seemed even more pronounced. Last chance to apologize, transfer boy, Jake announced, playing to his audience. Say you're sorry for wasting my time and maybe I'll go easy on you. Marcus said nothing. He simply stood with his feet shoulder-width apart, hands relaxed at his sides, breathing slowly and steadily. His eyes never left Jake's face, studying every micro-expression with the clinical detachment his uncle had taught him. Silent treatment, huh? Jake rolled his shoulders, loosening up for what he expected to be a brief and brutal encounter. Fine, let's get this over with. Jake rushed forward with his arms spread wide, intending to tackle Marcus to the ground, where his size advantage would be overwhelming. It was exactly the move Marcus had anticipated. Aggressive, sloppy, relying on brute force rather than technique. Marcus sidestepped the charge with liquid grace, his body moving like water around stone. As Jake stumbled past him, off balance and confused, Marcus's right hand flicked out in a lightning-quick jab that caught the larger boy square in the nose. The crack of cartilage breaking echoed across the parking lot. Jake roared in pain and fury, blood streaming down his face as he spun around to face his opponent. The crowd gasped collectively. In 5 seconds, the quiet transfer student had done something none of them thought possible. He'd hurt Jake Morrison. You little freak, Jake charged again, this time with his fists raised in a clumsy approximation of a boxing stance. Marcus moved like smoke, slipping Jake's wild haymaker and responding with a perfectly timed uppercut to the solar plexus. Jake doubled over, gasping for air, and Marcus followed up with a knee strike that lifted the linebacker off his feet. The crowd was silent now, stunned by the systematic dismantling of their school's supposed toughest fighter. Brett and Tyler stood frozen, their mouths hanging open as they watched their invincible leader getting methodically destroyed. Jake stumbled backward, his varsity jacket torn and blood staining his shirt. For the first time in his life, he was genuinely afraid. The boy standing before him bore no resemblance to the quiet victim he'd been tormenting for weeks. This was something else entirely, a predator who'd been hiding among sheep. How? Jake gasped, still struggling to breathe properly. Marcus stepped forward, his movements economical and purposeful. You never asked the right questions, he said quietly. You assumed I was weak because I wouldn't fight back. You assumed I was afraid because I walked away. Jake threw another desperate punch, telegraphing it so obviously that Marcus had time to duck, counter with a body shot, and step away before Jake even realized he'd missed. The truth is, I was afraid, Marcus continued, his voice carrying clearly across the silent parking lot. But not of you. I was afraid of this. He gestured to Jake's battered form. I was afraid of what I'd do if I stopped holding back. Jake's legs gave out and he dropped to one knee, his strength sapped by the precise strikes to his body's pressure points. The crowd watched in absolute silence as their former hero knelt before the boy they'd dismissed as weak. I spent 3 years training in underground fighting circuits, Marcus said, his words hitting the assembled students like physical blows. I'm the youngest regional champion in Southwest history. I've knocked out men twice your size, Jake, men who actually know how to fight. Jake tried to stand, but Marcus placed one hand on his shoulder, keeping him down with minimal effort. The gesture was almost gentle, but everyone present understood the implied threat. "You want to know why I left Phoenix?" Marcus asked, his voice still calm and controlled. "Because I hospitalized 3 seniors who thought they could pick on my little sister. Because I lost control and showed them exactly what I'm capable of when someone I care about gets hurt." Sarah pushed through the crowd, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and amazement. She'd known Marcus was different, but this revelation recontextualized everything about their friendship. "I came here hoping to leave that life behind," Marcus continued, addressing the crowd now rather than just Jake. "I wanted to prove I could be normal, that I could walk away from fights instead of ending them. For 3 weeks I let you humiliate me because I thought it was better than showing you who I really am." Jake looked up at him, blood still trickling from his broken nose. "Why now? Why stop hiding?" Marcus glanced towards Sarah, then back at Jake. "Because yesterday you crossed a line. You humiliated people who never did anything to you. You made them targets just because they showed me kindness." His voice hardened slightly. "That I can't ignore." The crowd began to murmur as the full implications of the fight sank in. The quiet transfer student wasn't just lucky, he was genuinely dangerous. The ease with which he'd dismantled Jake suggested levels of skill that none of them had imagined possible. Brett stepped forward from the crowd, his face pale but determined. "This isn't over, freak. You can't fight all of us." Marcus turned his attention to Jake's lieutenant, and Brett immediately regretted speaking. The look in Marcus's eyes was utterly devoid of mercy or fear. "Actually, I can," Marcus said simply, "but I won't. This ends here with Jake, unless you'd like to find out if you're tougher than your friend." Brett's courage evaporated under that steady gaze. He stepped back into the crowd, suddenly fascinated by his shoes. Marcus helped Jake to his feet, the gesture surprising everyone present. "I don't want to be your enemy," he told the beaten linebacker. "I just want to be left alone. Think you can manage that?" Jake nodded weakly, still struggling to process what had happened to him. The invincible reputation he'd built over 4 years of high school had been shattered in less than 5 minutes. "Good." Marcus stepped back, addressing the entire crowd now. "I'm not looking for trouble, I never was, but I won't run from it anymore either. Anyone who wants to test me can find me in the gymnasium after school. I'll be happy to give you a private lesson." The crowd began to disperse slowly, students talking in hushed, excited whispers. Several approached Marcus directly, their earlier dismissal replaced by genuine curiosity and respect. The social ecosystem of Westfield High had been permanently altered in the span of a single fight. Jake's friends helped him toward the school building, his varsity jacket hanging in tatters around his shoulders. As they passed Sarah, Jake stopped and looked back at Marcus. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "about your friends, about everything." Marcus nodded once, accepting the apology without fanfare. "Just remember this feeling," he replied. "Remember what it's like to be helpless. Maybe it'll make you think twice before you hurt someone else." In the days that followed, Marcus found his world transformed. The hallways that had once felt hostile now parted respectfully as he walked to class. Students who'd previously ignored him nodded politely or offered genuine smiles. The cafeteria table that had been designated for outcasts suddenly became prime real estate as classmates competed for the chance to sit with the mysterious fighter. Jake returned to school 2 days later with a splint on his nose and a significantly humbled attitude. His reign as the school's untouchable alpha had ended permanently, replaced by a grudging respect for the boy he'd underestimated so completely. Brett and Tyler, deprived of their leader's protection, found themselves occupying the same social space Marcus had inhabited just a week earlier. Sarah cornered Marcus after chemistry class on Friday, her expression a mixture of concern and fascination. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I mean, really okay? You seemed different during the fight. Scary different." Marcus considered her question carefully. "I've spent 3 years learning to be someone I didn't want to become," he said finally. "This week, I remembered that sometimes being dangerous is the only way to protect the things that matter. And now I try to find balance. I won't start fights, but I won't run from them either. I won't be the victim anymore, but I won't become the bully either." Sarah smiled, the first genuine expression of relief he'd seen from her all week. "Good, because despite everything, you're still the same person who helped me with my chemistry homework. That guy I can handle. The other guy..." She shuddered slightly. Marcus laughed, the first real laughter he'd felt since arriving at Westfield. "The other guy only comes out when necessary, I promise." That afternoon, Marcus returned to the gymnasium for his daily run. As he rounded the track, he noticed Jake sitting alone in the bleachers, watching him with an unreadable expression. Marcus slowed to a walk, approaching the defeated linebacker cautiously. "Something you need?" Jake shook his head. "Just trying to figure out how I missed it. All those signs that you were different. All those times you could have ended this before. It started. Would you have listened if I'd told you the truth on day one?" Jake considered this. "Probably not. I was too used to being the biggest fish in the pond. Now you know there are sharks in the water too." Jake stood up, wincing slightly from his still healing injuries. "For what it's worth, I learned something this week about what it feels like to be powerless, about how it feels when someone bigger picks on you just because they can." Marcus nodded. "That was the point." "Will you teach me?" Jake asked suddenly. The question caught Marcus off guard. "Teach you what?" "How to fight like that. Really fight, not just throw my weight around." Marcus studied Jake's face, looking for signs of deception or residual hostility. He found only genuine humility and a desperate desire to rebuild his shattered self-image. "Fighting isn't about hurting people," Marcus said finally. "It's about protecting what matters. It's about having the strength to walk away when you could destroy someone, and the courage to stand your ground when walking away isn't an option. I understand that now." Marcus resumed his running, Jake falling into step beside him despite his injuries. "We'll see," Marcus said. "Come back next week. If you're serious about learning, we'll start with the basics." "But Jake?" "Yeah, if I ever catch you picking on someone weaker than you again, champion fighter or not, I'll remind you exactly how this week felt." "Understood." Jake nodded firmly. "Understood." As they ran laps together in the fading afternoon light, Marcus reflected on the strange turn his life had taken. He'd come to Westfield hoping to escape his violent past, only to discover that sometimes the only way to find peace was to remind people why war was a bad idea. The underground circuit had taught him to fight, but high school had taught him something more valuable: the difference between being strong and being a bully, between inspiring fear and commanding respect. Monday morning arrived with a new dynamic at Westfield High. Marcus Rivera was no longer the quiet transfer student hiding from his past. He was the champion fighter who'd chosen mercy over vengeance, strength over cruelty, and in the end, that made all the difference.